Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today we'll talk about mentoring and how it interacts with flexible schedules. Now, there's been extensive research showing that there are some serious challenges with mentoring in remote work. Employee mentoring has taken a hit as remote and hybrid work has become more popular. So, work from home research shows that on-site workers spend more time in mentoring than remote workers. So, those who come to the office spend 40 more minutes per week on mentoring, 25 more minutes per week on training, and 15 more minutes per week on professional development. And there's been other research, for example, a Fortune 500 company showing that if you are co-located with your team, the research has been in a Fortune 500 company that had two separate buildings, and that was already before the pandemic. And it had some team members who were in the same building and had some team members on the same team who were in different buildings. So people in the same building who are in the same team received quite a bit more mentoring than those who were in different buildings on the same team. And that was definitely a big gap. It was something like 25% gap. And that gap narrowed to 8% when everyone went to remote work during the pandemic, which meant that people who were previously started off in person, they still received more mentoring even though they were remote compared to people who started off distant from each other in different buildings and they went to fully remote work. So that is definitely an issue in terms of mentoring. And we need to acknowledge that that's a serious problem with remote work. That's why you need a structured mentoring program. You should not rely on mentoring by osmosis by hoping that just returning to the office will solve all problems. People are not used to coming to the office and they really resent coming to the office to do mentoring. That's why the lack of a clear mentoring program is going to harm staff development, especially in flexible work arrangements, which is the future. There's no question that hybrid work of various sorts is the future for all companies that want to succeed in the modern world, because companies that are forcing their staff back to the office 5 days a week, they're seeing huge retention challenges, engagement challenges, morale challenges, recruitment challenges. So that is not a good future for them. But mentoring is taking a hit. Junior team members, their development is taking a hit. So that's why leaders like Mark Zuckerberg of Meta and others have shown that previously those who backed fully flexible work have later mandated office return for some days. For example, Meta required junior staff on site for 3 days a week and also asked senior staff to come in to mentor recent hires for 3 days a week. This is not a great program because that is going to, as I mentioned, cause attrition, resistance, disengagement, reduce productivity. So return to office wars where people are asked to come in just to mentor junior staff breed really serious resentment among senior staff. So what I've seen when I've been working with companies that try to do this is that senior staff come in, but they isolate themselves. They don't want to mentor junior staff just because their leaders are told them that, hey, you need to come in to mentor junior staff, and that's the only reason you're coming in. They have what's called psychological reactance. They really don't want to do this. So they really are not interested in it because senior leaders are telling them that the only reasons that they're forcing them to commute to work and waste hours and hours of their days per week and many thousands of dollars per year. That's not something people are happy about. So that's something that really harms their relationship with junior staff and hinders their mentoring of junior staff. So a much more effective mentoring solution is a structured program, combining a structured mentoring program, an intentional, deliberate one, with flexibility. So what does that involve? So this involves senior staff coming in. You don't have to come in more than once a week. Once a week, twice a week sometimes, but once a week is fine. I've done a lot of work, including with Fortune 500 companies, as well as middle market companies of various sorts, where senior staff coming in once a week for several hours of mentoring is fine if you structure it effectively. And of course, on the day that they're coming in, they should also have in-person collaboration. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about mentoring. And of course, you also want to combine some in-person mentoring with virtual sessions. So you don't only have to have in-person mentoring, but virtual sessions as well. Much more effective than the 3 days a week, the spray and pray hope for mentoring by osmosis. Without structured mentoring, the growth of employees is going to be stunted and organizations are less vibrant, with junior staff not being developed effectively, senior staff resenting and leaving in larger numbers, being disengaged. That's a problem. So what do you want for effective mentoring? There was a study by Charter and Qualtrics that finds that hybrid work doesn't limit the potential of mentoring. And a Harvard Business Review article reports that physical proximity is actually not essential for mentoring. What's essential are some of the things that you can get from physical proximity if you don't treat remote work effectively. You can also get them from virtual interactions if you structure them effectively. So you need things like commitment, trust, and relation quality and competence in mentoring, those 4 factors. That's what really matters quite a bit more than physical proximity. Physical proximity can help bring these about, but you can also bring them about in other ways. Although I do recommend some physical proximity, especially at the initial stages of mentoring, which really helps build up especially the trust and the relationship quality. So you want to focus on recognizing that mentoring overall relies much less on the medium, whether it's physical or virtual, than on the outcomes of commitment, trust, relationship quality, and competence. One way of getting good mentoring is individual lunch sessions, which don't have to involve people coming into the office. Senior professionals, of course, have limited time, generally more limited time than junior professionals. So many prefer to minimize their time in the office. We see a lot of research on that. So you want to think beyond mentoring activities, in-person one-on-ones in the office. Individual lunch sessions, they don't have to require that. You can just meet at a restaurant and have lunch. You don't have to come into the office for them. Of course, many people want to have them in the office, and that's fine. But the goal is to have the individual lunch session, not to have people come to the office. Lunch sessions with senior staff are really powerful for fostering that personal bonding and vulnerability and psychological safety and trust. So I recommend having some of those in-person sessions, especially in the beginning. I've helped structure a lot of mentoring programs in terms of hybrid work, flexible work, and having those lunch sessions, especially early on in the relationship, is very valuable. It's not necessity. You can also do virtual coffee meetings as a way of building those relationships and trust, but it takes quite a bit more virtual coffee meetings to build up the relationships and trust than in-person meetings. But of course, you can't do that. And I've seen a lot of successful, fully remote mentoring relationships, but it does take more time to develop that trust and those relationships. So that's something to think about. But let's go on to virtual coffee meetings, which are generally is what you'll want to move to. You'll want to have initial meetings for lunch and then move on to virtual coffee meetings to help sustain relationships between junior and senior professionals. That's the lower time commitment and flexibility, which makes them quite a bit more appealing. So many senior staff, of course, did move during the pandemic, but they maintain ties virtually. And thinking about quarterly retreats is a good idea. If they can come in for quarterly retreats, that's another opportunity to start their relationship with junior folks and then move on to virtual coffee meetings. So continue mentoring through those virtual meetings. But again, you can also start with fully remote virtual coffee meetings. It does take more time and effort. Now, you want to have regular mentor-mentee check-ins. They are vital for successful mentoring relationships. So the Charter and Qualtrics research shows that 51% of very successful mentors meet once a week or more, compared to 37% for somewhat successful mentors. So you want to make regular time for meetings, whether in person or virtual. But it doesn't have to be just focused solely on mentoring intensely. You can also have other forms of meetings, and I'll talk about them in a bit. But you do want to have those virtual meetings or in-person meetings once a week. One way to have these meetings, which I find quite helpful, is group lunch sessions. So group mentoring sessions. They facilitate knowledge sharing and relationship building both between the senior person and a number of junior people. So you have, let's say, one senior person and 4 junior people. And also helps build relationships between junior people themselves, which provides peer-to-peer cohort mentoring. So that is very, very helpful. Peer-to-peer mentoring, where people learn from each other and that they can reveal vulnerabilities, anxieties, which they sometimes might not feel comfortable revealing to senior people. They can reveal to people on their own levels, and they can get mentoring from each other. It makes efficient use of senior professional time, the time of senior professionals, and it allows that collective wisdom from peer-to-peer cohort mentoring from junior folks to each other to flourish. And it helps cross-pollinate ideas because different junior people will have different ideas, and they sometimes give the good ideas that senior people aren't thinking about because they have good out-of-the-box ideas that are different because they're fresher. And so that peer-based collaborative learning is going to be very valuable. And so you want to also ease the burden on senior staff if you have 1 senior person and 4 junior people engage in a group mentoring session. So you want to start in person, those group lunch sessions, and then you can transition to remote as trust develops to virtual coffee sessions for 1 senior person and several junior people at the same time. But you definitely want to have those one-on-one relationships with a senior person, and you can also separately have with different senior person or the same senior person group meetings. In person at first, group lunch sessions, or at the quarterly retreats where you have that group meeting and you create those bonds, and then moving on to remote meetings. And of course, it will be best to occasionally have some in-person meetings to reinforce those relationships that are cultivated and maintained remotely. Another thing that you want to think about is co-working sessions. So I said that you don't have to spend all the time that you're meeting intensely on mentoring. Another really good activity is to work next to each other. That's, again, I mentioned that the Qualtrics and study and charter study that showed that once a week check-ins are really helpful, but you can have them from co-working together, not only through one-on-one, more intense mentoring meetings, which you don't need to do more than once a month. So I recommend doing once a month the more intense one-on-one meeting, whether it's in person or remote, once a month group lunch session or group virtual coffee meeting session, and then the rest of the weeks having co-working sessions where you work on your individual tasks, but you work next to each other so that the junior people can ask senior people questions when they have questions. And of course, it also helps build the relationships because you can chat briefly and so on. But you are not wasting nearly as much time of the senior person because they are working on their tasks and the junior person is working on their tasks. So co-working sessions are great for that because they junior people and senior people gather to collaborate in a shared space. And again, you could have one-on-one meeting collaborative sessions, or you could have one to several. So again, 1 senior person and 4 junior people co-working next to each other. So that will, in those cases, there will generally be more questions from junior people, and senior people will end up spending somewhat more of their time answering them. But the benefit is that they get the answers and all the junior people get the answers. It's not only one junior person. So you have a lot of learning happening at the same time. And these sessions are great for knowledge sharing and mutual support. They foster collaboration and idea development, and they enable immediate feedback and real-time adjustments. They help spark creativity and spontaneity. So there's a lot of benefits around these co-working sessions. Now, you don't have to have them in person. That's key. I recommend starting them in person. So you work next to each other if possible. Of course, if you're located distantly, it's not possible, and you can just start them remotely. What you can do is have them remotely. You just sign on to a video conference call. You turn your microphone off. You leave your video on if you're comfortable. If not, you can turn it off, and you just work on your tasks.
But when junior people have questions, they can turn on their microphone and ask, and you leave the speakers on, and you turn on your microphone and ask, and then the senior person can answer those questions. It's not as good as working next to each other in terms of relationship building, but it does do some of the effect of relationship building, and it certainly does the same benefit in terms of answering questions and knowledge sharing. So they're flexible, they can be done from anywhere, that's a big benefit. So these sessions remove geographical boundaries and allow for diverse perspectives. So you have some senior people who are not located close by, you can bring them in for virtual co-working sessions to get their wisdom to the junior people. So they don't require, although they benefit from initial in-person trust building. That's a really flexible tool for teams with fully remote members, so keep that in mind. Or again, if you want have a senior person who's located remotely from a number of junior people, there's a lot of flexibility that you could have with virtual co-working sessions. Thinking about goals. Moving on from the format, thinking about goals. Have clear goals and incentives for mentoring to maximize the returns on investment of time of your people. And regularly evaluate mentoring to see how it's going and have continuous improvement. The Charter and Qualtrics study shows that successful mentoring is supported through compensation, 27% versus 17% for less successful mentors, performance recognition, 42% for successful mentors versus 33%, and mentoring time. So again, 39% for successful versus 33% for less successful. And that's why I strongly encourage you to embrace structured mentoring to have a thriving organization. Structured mentoring programs are vital for flexible settings. So incorporate diverse mentoring activities such as individual lunch sessions, virtual meetings, coffee meetings, group sessions, again, in-person and virtual co-working initiatives, in-person and virtual, and have that goal-oriented mentoring with evaluations of performance. Take control of your mentoring program. Audit your current mentoring practices, thinking about structuring the program. Don't rely on mentoring by osmosis. Your choices is what will shape the result. Pursue intentional growth for your junior people by using structured mentoring, or just accept what happens if you leave it to chance. Letting mentoring unfold naturally doesn't lead to favorable results. All right, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you checked it out, and make sure to leave a review. It helps others discover the show, and it helps us improve the show.